What's up, everyone? Welcome back to C&D Sports. Today, we've got a big day for you. The NBA regular season starts in about a week and a half now, so we've got our NBA season preview for you, where we're going to be breaking down our regular season power rankings heading into the season, give you our predictions on what the conferences are going to look like standing-wise, and overall just get you set for the start of the season. So, a busy video here. Let's get right into it. So we're going to go from 30 to 1 here, kind of build that suspense. So at 30...
Houston Rockets. On paper, the future is bright, but right now you can't really expect much from just so many young, inexperienced, and unproven players.
Yeah.
So I don't have much hope. I don't think there's much to expect from this team, but the draft.
They drafted very well. Obviously, when you get Jalen Green, that's huge. Sengun, Garuba are also two guys. Sengun looked great in the Summer League this year. So the future looks bright. But as for right now, that team is just bleak, continued to lose stars in the recent years. So it's not the Rockets of old. This is going to have to be the Rockets of new.
Yep.
But when will that new get good? Not this year, probably.
No, not this year. But tough competition for the worst team. At 29, we have Orlando.
Same situation.
And yeah, they sold off, and they never really had those stars like James Harden, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook. The closest thing is Vucevic, but Orlando, it's another rebuild into another rebuild, it seems.
Yeah.
I mean, are they headed in the right direction with Suggs and Wagner? Maybe, but...
Yeah, I think they are. I think they have the makings for a good start, as obviously those are two great players to start with. But, I mean, we're not even mentioning Cole Anthony. He's another guy. Jonathan Isaac, Mo Bamba. There are other good guys to build around as well.
So, it's the same situation. Young guys, just unproven, and you don't really know what to expect.
Right.
Now, Cleveland is kind of all over the place. I don't understand what this team is. This is who we have at 28. First off, is Colin Sexton out?
He was supposed to be traded at the NBA draft, and then he's still here, and the season starts on not next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after that. So a week and a half. And Colin Sexton is still a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Whether he remains a member all season, tough to say.
Yeah, no idea.
But sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say they have good young pieces, but they're really big.
They're a really big lineup.
And it just, again, that's where it's just so questionable, the moves they make. I don't understand at all why they brought in Lauri Markkanen.
No, especially after you draft Evan Mobley.
Yeah.
And after you sign that extension with Jared Allen. So they're thinking of playing Markkanen at small forward, but he's a guy that doesn't really play small forward, and when he has played small forward, he hasn't been good at it.
No.
He very much excels being kind of a mobile big man. He does not excel on the wings. So
they have two guys they should be starting at center in Allen and Mobley, and two guys they should be starting at power forward.
Right.
In Markkanen and Love. So, and again, it's going to be another situation for Markkanen. We saw it last season with Chicago not giving him the playing time, going to Thaddeus Young, among others. I think he's probably going to move again.
Yeah.
So it's very questionable. I have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
Maybe they move on from Allen and Love along with Colin Sexton, but we'll see. I don't have much hope for this team and how they're building. It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
Anyways, at 27, we have Minnesota.
This is a talented team on paper. When you have Cat, when you have D'Angelo Russell.
That's been the story, though.
They've just continued to underperform, and they've just continued to be a dysfunctional organization. I mean, they fired their head coach a week ago, and that didn't seem like it was the case. They've fired management. Ownership just doesn't really seem to have a grasp on the business side of this team and on the coaching end. Yeah. So it really doesn't matter how talented you are on the floor when everything controlling that is just chaos. So,
and it's really the talent that pushes them up. They're really at this point a talented version of Cleveland in terms of dysfunctional teams. But above them, on paper, San Antonio should be a lot lower, who we have at 26. But when you have Pop in that great system, they may continue to surprise us despite losing DeMar DeRozan this offseason.
And when you have good building pieces, being headlined by DeJounte Murray, by Keldon Johnson, it certainly gives a lot more hope. But they would have been higher last year on the list when you have DeMar DeRozan to add to that. Obviously, Keldon Johnson's probably going to be the one to take a lot of that pressure off of them that has
scoring pressure. Yeah,
that's been put on them with losing DeMar. But when you're coached well, you're going to fare better than a lot of other rebuilding teams. But this is a team that I don't expect them to be in the play-in at this point.
Nope. Then we have Detroit, who is another rebuilder. I think you can say they're headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
They've had a great offseason. They've done great in their developing, but I don't think it's time yet for their moves to pay off and result in playoff success or even overall team success. It's just not there yet because it is a young core.
Right. And of course, when your young core is led by number 1 overall pick Cade Cunningham, that certainly not only does it make your draft night look good, but it just makes your overall outlook on the future look a whole lot better. And with performances like Jeremy Grant last year, it'll be interesting to see how they continue to respond.
A snub from a most improved player, you would think.
Yeah.
But, or at least nominations. Shout out Julius Randle. Anyways, Oklahoma City Thunders, who we have at 24.
Right.
And with the copious amounts of picks, it's really the future you're looking towards.
Yeah.
As of now on that roster, you look at Shea and you look at Lou Dort. Those are some guys that give you hope for the now, but not enough to be pushing in or have any shot at playoffs, you would think.
And they're another team that drafted well. Obviously, when the results remain to be seen, these guys haven't played against grown men in the NBA yet, but on paper they've drafted well. On paper, the future should be good when you have 10,000 picks to choose from in the next decade. So they're a team that could be surprising, but I think we kind of have our power rankings segmented out here into 4 different things, and they're probably the top of the list of teams that won't make a play-in spot.
Oh yeah, play-in spot. Now, kicking off the play-in contention or contenders, we have the Indiana Pacers, and this team will go as far as Domantas Sabonis and even Malcolm Brogdon take them.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can depend on TJ Warren. If you can, that's a huge boost.
Yeah.
And that should...
if he's bubble TJ Warren.
Yeah, too. That's another thing you have to count on. But even then, I think no matter what, he's a good third option, and they have somewhat of a big 3.
Right.
It's on the lower tier, but it's something that may help them push into at least the play-ins, but for now you have to keep them lower because it's just a lot of uncertainty.
Right. I'm curious to see what Rick Carlisle being back in charge does for them too, because obviously we know what happens when Rick Carlisle has a star European power forward. Good things happened with Dirk Nowitzki, so maybe good things happen with Domantas Sabonis.
I don't know if I'm overhyping him, but he has that potential.
He does, and it's one of those things where there were some lean years in Dallas that Rick Carlisle coached. Yeah. So,
I mean, to be honest, I think I don't mean to overhype him, but anything Nikola Jokic can do, I think this guy can push into that territory in the right situation. Do it to some degree, Yeah. I'm not saying he's Nikola Jokic by any means.
But he does a lot of what Nikola Jokic does, but Jokic just does it that little bit better. He has the same sort of skill set.
That's why he won an MVP.
Jokic is just more developed. Yeah.
Anyways, we move on to Sacramento, who always seems to overperform. I don't understand outside of De'Aaron Fox and like Tyrese Halliburton. I don't see much there.
It's overperforming on paper because you look at them and they're not that crazy on paper, being led by Fox, Hield, and Halliburton. But it's also that sense of they underperform as well because for any hockey fans watching, I kind of find them as the equivalent to the Buffalo Sabres minus last season. The Sabres were terrible last season. Where it's that sense of every year it was, this is the year that they're going to break through. This is the year that they should make the playoffs. And they just never do. And it's just a lot of waiting for Sacramento. This is the year they get back into the playoffs. and they never do. You know, they were invited to that 8-game pre-playoff bubble tournament, and again, they were invited there, but they didn't get it done. They're a team that, yeah, they're the Sacramento Kings. They have a long-standing history of missing the playoffs. So in that sense, they overperform because they do have a lot of talent, but they also underperform in a sense of, well, when is that talent going to turn into something? And it just hasn't yet, even though maybe it should have already.
I think it's kind of like the Minnesota situation where it's just on-court dysfunction.
Yeah.
There may not be issues or anything like that, but when you have that much talent and it's not cohesive, there's obviously an issue. And I don't think anything should be expected of them until they figure that out. Because, again, outside of De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton, I don't see much there.
They'll always be in that playoff conversation or in this case, the play-in conversation now that that's a thing. But they could get it, but I'm not going to pick them to get it. So
no. Then we move on to Washington, and they've made a lot of moves. They're still a talented team despite losing Westbrook. But, again, it's just another team that I see a lot of dysfunction in. And with Bradley Beal taking charge, I don't know if it's going to work because when he was in charge of the Wizards last season, it just didn't. Things didn't work in Washington until Westbrook became their best player.
Mm-hmm. And again, like you said, they do have a lot of talent with Bradley Beal, Spencer Dinwiddie, Montrezl Harrell, Kyle Kuzma, KCP, Hachimura, Thomas Bryant. There's a lot of potential there for this team to be a good basketball team, but it's that cohesiveness, as we're going to get to it with a lot of other teams that may be in a better standing than Washington, but that when you bring in a lot of new personnel, is that personnel going to work? Because frankly, with the guys they brought in from the Lakers and the Westbrook deal, it didn't really work in LA. So is it going to work in Washington? That remains to be seen. But again, they have a lot of good individual talent, but how does that translate in a team setting?
And who's their leader? Like, I'm not even talking about best player, but
they don't have a clear number one.
No.
Beal's the closest thing, but like you said, anytime Beal has led this team, even before Westbrook,
in the John Wall years, it just didn't work.
It didn't work when John Wall was injured. They were just a bad team without John Wall, and I think Brad Beal, he's not necessarily that playmaker that you need as your number one. He's a very good offensive player, but it's always the shots need to be made for him. He's not really good at creating shots for other people. He can create his own shots, but yeah, he's not a guy that's going to make guys like Hachimura better because it hasn't worked so far.
Yep. Then we have the Raptors, and the Raptors you can never count out because they're so well coached.
Yeah.
And their system's fantastic. The additions just always seem to pay off, and they're finally back in Toronto. So there's something to be said with all these teams, whether it's the Blue Jays in baseball or the Raptors in basketball. There's something to be said about that fan base that really elevates the on-court performance and product. So I think that's going to be a huge boost, and I don't know if Siakam will hold them back. It is a loss losing Kyle Lowry, but heading in that young direction, I think is the right direction for them to take to develop. And I think they're a dark horse to make the play-ins.
Yeah. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with being back in Toronto. Just having the guys go out there and be excited to play basketball at home. Fred VanVleet did not like Tampa. Pascal Siakam did not like Tampa. So to have them back and healthy, just to have that morale back, is huge for them, especially when you're without Kyle Lowry. They have to be the leaders now. There is no huge vocal leadership. You lost a huge piece of that. So to be back at home really helps make that a little more easier transition.
Yeah, it's a lot more comfortable for them.
And Scotty Barnes is going to be great. I know on draft night it was a little shocking they didn't go for Jalen Suggs, but the way that they've used him in preseason, the way he looked in Summer League, I think Scotty Barnes, I look at him as DeMar DeRozan-esque in terms of potential, which is obviously big shoes to fill in Toronto, as he's Toronto royalty at this point. But I think he is one of those guys that when people compare him to Draymond Green, he could be that guy. And Draymond Green has 3 rings, so who's to say that Scotty Barnes can't have success in Toronto?
Yep. Now, Memphis had another interesting offseason, and I didn't like it. I think JV's a huge loss. Steven Adams in no way can fill that role. But they have a lot of young players who can improve.
Yeah, they do. And whenever you're led by John Morant, that always
You're
helps.
going to be in the mix.
Exactly. But
because it is a cohesive unit, unlike Sacramento. Because a team like that, for example, on paper, even Washington, maybe even Toronto, they're all better. But Memphis has the juice.
I like Dylan Brooks. I like Kyle Anderson. I think they're good secondary pieces, but are they good enough to really propel this team to more success than they saw last year? Who knows?
Without JV, I think they probably will take steps backwards. But again, you'll see because you never know. John Morant's still young, and I'm sure he has another gear.
And Steven Adams isn't a scrub either. Steven Adams is capable,
but you're
it's
losing a lot of offense.
Yeah, you're losing a lot of the mobility that JV has, that pick and roll offense. It's not really part of Steven Adams' game to the same extent as it is JV's. So
Yep. Now, New Orleans, they get JV. Their front court is just filthy. You have Brandon Ingram, you have Zion Williamson.
And then, of course, JV up the middle is just huge.
Yeah, but no backcourt.
No. Devontae Graham is a good player, but he's not...
You don't want him there alone on the back end.
He's not Lonzo Ball.
No.
He's not Bledsoe. There are a lot of gaps back there.
And he's young.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not even like experience can kind of bail him out or bail them out.
This year, it's playing or bust, or I think Zion's gone.
Yeah.
And that's how they need to approach it. They need to do everything possible, and maybe that means going out at the trade deadline and trying to bring someone in, because playing with Zion Williamson is probably a draw for some players, to try to just, see the magnificence that is Zion. But I don't know. They're in a tough place right now because they need to perform. There's never been a situation where they've needed to perform since Anthony Davis left.
Yeah, they need to. They should. It's just the expectations are probably higher than it should be, right? A lot of people are probably picking them to be a no-doubt playoff team, but I don't think they're there because they just haven't shown any signs of it. And JV and Devontae Graham probably are additions in comparison to just losing Lonzo Ball. But again, you never know when you make changes like that how it's going to work until you start playing those games.
Right.
But now we go into our teams that are guaranteed either a play-in or playoff spot.
That we feel are guaranteed.
Yeah. So Charlotte is who we're going to kick it off with at 17, and they're running it back, which I think is great because they're young and developing. So that's what you need to do. You already had your big signing in Gordon Hayward, and despite him being injury prone, I don't think they really need to make big moves. Again, I think it's just developing from within at this point, and I think they're going to take steps forward this season.
Yeah, the personnel is there for them to do what they did last year. I think LaMelo Ball is only going to get better. Obviously, his health, he did miss a month of the season last year. Obviously, he needs to stay healthy for that to happen. Gordon Hayward needs to stay healthy for them to exceed expectations. They did Gordon Hayward wasn't healthy all the time last year, and they still did manage to make the play-in. But if they want to make more than the play-in, if they want to push to that maybe 5 seed, maybe 6 seed, he's got to be there. They got to have big seasons from Bridges and Washington. So, yeah, that's the Charlotte Hornets are in a good place right now to make that push. It's just a matter of they have to do it, and that young talent has to pull up.
Yep, and at 16, we have the New York Knicks, and there are a lot of variables here.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're going to get in Julius Randle.
No.
You honestly don't know what you're going to get in Derrick Rose, whether it's an injury-riddled season. He may take steps back. You don't know. Then you bring in Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker, who, again, are more guys you don't know what you're going to get. But if all these players perform, I mean...
And we're not even talking about guys like Mitchell Robinson, who put on a ton of weight and a ton of muscle this year. So hopefully that keeps him healthier, because he was a big reason why they were so dominant up the middle, making it easier on Julius Randle to really play and kind of create his own shots, as opposed to being that traditional big man like he's had to be in the past. But it'll be interesting to see, was last year a fluke? And maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. That's why they're kind of middle in the pack in our power rankings here.
They could be lower, but they definitely could be higher. So
I think they have the talent that, like we said, they're guaranteed to make some sort of playoff spot, make a play-in spot, but just where that is. Are they going to finish 4th or are they going to finish 10th? Because it's anywhere in that range.
Yep. Then we have Golden State, and you can't really count them out. Steph Curry's going to put on a show. Draymond's still there. He may not be like the old athletic Draymond, but he can play make, and he can play make quite well, which takes a little bit of a load off Steph to just focus on scoring. And Klay's coming back around December, so if Steph and Draymond can pop off for the first half of the season, Klay comes back, gets his groove going, I think it'll be smooth sailing, but they can suffer from injuries, and that's another reason why you have to keep this team in the middle, because they could be lower, they could be higher.
And having a vaccinated Andrew Wiggins is huge too, because he played that tertiary role to Draymond and Steph. So now that Klay's back in the mix, now that you have a guy that's capable of being a third guy, who's now, if Klay comes back healthy, is going to be your 4th, that really spells good success. And so
by the time he's settled in, he could be their second option.
Exactly.
Move some guys down the depth chart. They have a lot of options now, and you can't forget about James Wiseman, who's still developing. So there's a lot of potential, a good mix of vets and young guys in Golden State. It's just a matter of whether or not they're healthy.
This ranking depends on Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
If he can come back December and play that.
For me, it actually depends more on Steph and Draymond being healthy. Because even without Klay, I think they'll be fine. Because they did it last year. They didn't make the playoffs, but they were in the play-ins. They were in the mix.
Right.
So even if Klay comes back for a couple games, maybe you have him on load management. I think it'll work out just fine. But above them at 14, we have the LA Clippers,
which may look low for a conference finalist, but
there's no Kawhi Leonard, and
possibly for the whole year. Maybe he comes back, but knowing Kawhi and injuries, there's a lot of load management, and maybe they just look at this year as, let's make sure we just signed you to an extension. Let's make sure that it was worth it and hold you out this year, because I don't think anyone really expects them to make a run for the title this year.
No, and I think it would be good to have Paul George lead this team and get his groove back like he was, for him to be the player he was in Indiana, because we saw a glimpse of that these past playoffs. And if he is that, I think they'll make the playoffs because they have great depth, and they have a good system, surprisingly, since losing guys like Lou Will, Montrezl Harrell. You wouldn't have expected this team to work, but they work. And they played well without Kawhi. They made the conference finals without Kawhi. It's just going to be a long season. You do worry about Paul George's health, but I think it's going to be good for them to develop. And when Kawhi comes back, he can probably carry them on like he did the Raptors and probably get them a championship. But next season, they'll probably be a lot higher, bearing them being healthy.
Right.
So at 13... we have the Portland Trail Blazers, and I don't think they're going to take any steps backwards because they're running it back. Now they're going to have a full season of Norm Powell. So you look at guys like Dame, they're going to pull up, but I think their focus is going to be on staying healthy for the playoffs. So the regular season, they may not wow you. That's why we have them a little lower. But on paper, this team still has Nurkic. At power forward, they still have Rocco, and they have Larry Nance backing him up, which I think is a great addition. He was fantastic in Cleveland. Small forward, you have Norm, CJ at shooting guard, and then Damian Lillard, second best point guard in the league.
And then still have guys like Anthony Simons coming off the bench is big as well. So they have the talent to be a good team, but it's just a matter they don't start the seasons well, and that's what always puts them back. They're always great at closing the season, but they need to get off to that good start if they want to be a top 5 team in the West, because the West is just so deep and so competitive. So.
Yeah. And 2 last points, they also have Cody Zeller, shout out, and it doesn't look like they're going to trade or move on from Dame because they've run it back. So I think those talks can quiet down and maybe wait till next year. At 12, we have Boston, and really it's just how far is Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, how far are they going to take this team?
To say that Boston fans don't have reason for optimism here, I think is false. But I also, tread lightly with the optimism here. In the past, they have been, conference finals contenders, championship contenders. I don't think they're that this year just because of how developed the Eastern Conference has gotten to this point. But I think they could still finish in the same spot. They just don't have the championship ambitions that have been tied to that spot being a team that finishes between 4 and 7. It's a talented team of their, when you have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown.
And their support there, you have Dennis Schroeder, Marcus Smart, who, whether you have Marcus Smart at shooting guard or point guard, you have options there. You can move Jaylen Brown to small forward, shooting guard. Jason Tatum plays power forward, small forward. And then you still have Horford. You have options. You have Williams at center. You have Canner. So their starting 5, I think, is always going to be good, and they can actually afford losses. At 11, this is where we have the Dallas Mavericks, and this team's really going to, like Boston, go as far as Luka takes them. Maybe Kristaps steps up, but I don't have much hope for Dallas outside of Luka. It just doesn't work for me. But regular season, I think they're going to dominate. It's just playoffs, they're probably going to disappoint again. What do you think of them?
This is a team that they're really hard to gauge here because they will go as far as Luka takes them. So the fact that Kristaps Porzingis there is still there, I'm not a fan of that.
No. I think that was a change they need to make.
Yeah, and they didn't make that change, so I don't think they get over the hump to really be a top 10 team in terms of power rankings, to really continue to push the Western Conference. But when you have Luka Doncic, not only is he just fantastic, but he does make the players around him a lot better, like Tim Hardaway Jr. So it'll be interesting to see what Dallas can do. And I think at this point, it's just try to win a first-round matchup here because that's been a struggle for them.
So at 10, we have the Chicago Bulls and a lot of moves that should work this offseason, right? You have Lonzo Ball, who doesn't really get in the way of what your team does. He's very good at elevating the people around him. You bring in DeMar, you still have Vooch, and you still have Zach LaVine. I think it's going to be a very dominant combo, and they have options on how they go in and play games every night, whether they focus on defense, whether they focus on scoring. This team should be able to do it all.
Right, exactly. And this is a team that I think the Chicago Bulls are finally in the place that they wanted to be before. And I think they were a team that had a lot of young potential, but it was just adding those proven pieces to complement Zach LaVine, because Zach LaVine's not a number one guy per se. But I think guys like Vucevic and DeRozan have experience doing that. And I think that's what Zach LaVine needs to develop that characteristic about himself. And to really prove, because Zach LaVine is an integral part of this team. So those are guys that the success of the Bulls this year and the success of the players around him are going to factor into whether Zach LaVine wants to come back to Chicago, because that's still uncertain.
Yep, and there are two things to this team. One, I don't think there's any pressure on their big four, but at the same time, I don't know if they have a clear leader.
Right.
So it's a combination of the two and working that out. If they can, I think they should have no problems in Chicago. At 9, you have Atlanta. They proved a lot of people wrong, and they've done nothing to hurt their team in the offseason. So I think running it back's a great idea for them. And I don't know how well they're going to do in the regular season, but you saw it last year. This team's built for the playoffs, and they'll get the job done.
Exactly. They're one of the best shooting teams in the NBA right now. You can't leave them too much space on the 3-point line. And they can beat you inside too with John Collins, with Clint Capella. They're a team that just runs depth with guys like Bogdanovich, with guys like Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, Cam Reddish. That was the other name I was looking for. They're just, everyone on that roster can perform from 1 to 13. So they're really they remind me a lot of like San Antonio Spurs teams, where Greg Popovich would really rely on his bench and he relied on his depth. They're a team that they play a little different than those Spurs teams, but it's that depth center that really pushed them to the Eastern Conference Finals and really almost pushed them to the finals. Is that was a really tight series with the Bucks, and I think this is a team that's going to build off that success. Now that Nate McMillan is there full-time coaching them, obviously he's made Trae Young was already a great player, but he's made him into the superstar that he is now after that miraculous playoff run.
Yeah, and Trae Young is a superstar at this point. At 8, we have the LA Lakers. They're old, but they're very talented.
Talent-wise, they should be a lot higher on this list, but it's just the fact that with age comes injury, and this is a team that last year faced a lot of injuries. LeBron's not getting any younger. Anthony Davis is not getting any younger. And all the depth they brought in, whether it be Russell Westbrook, Trevor Ariza, Carmelo Anthony. Russell Westbrook's the youngest guy that I just mentioned there. Beyond like Talen Horton-Tucker, their regular rotation pieces are very old. Wayne Ellington's another guy that we could mention too. It's just they brought in a lot of aging talent, and that's great if it all works out. These are certainly great ball players, but it's that health thing. Can they stay healthy? Because this ranking is also factoring in that
for some teams you can already project they're not going to have a healthy season from players they depend on, and that's where they get punished. And yeah, the Lakers are kind of in the middle of, okay, if they're healthy they're going to be higher, but if they're not, they very much could be lower.
Right. At
7, we have Miami, another team with some big additions, and additions that by no means should hurt, right? You look at Kyle Lowry, I can't think of a team that he can't elevate. Then you still have Jimmy Butler, you still have Bam, Victor Oladipo's healthy and he's returned. So they have options, they have depth, and I think that's going to lead to them having a good season.
Yeah, I certainly agree. The depth, I like Bam Adebayo up front there. I think he's probably looking to have a bit of a better season to kind of get back to that bubble form that he had. But yeah, the Miami Heat did what they had to do to try to push for another finals appearance there, and I think they're a team that is possibly capable of that.
Yep. And then we have the Denver Nuggets, and they're really only this low because Jamal Murray's out. If he's healthy, I think they're pushing for number 1.
They're the best team in the West if he's healthy.
Yeah, without question. But how long are they going to be without him? There's no clear timetable on his return, so we'll see. And Jokic had a phenomenal season, far above his peers last year. Is this who he is, or is he going to repeat that season, or is he going to fall back a bit? Because he was just putting up ridiculous numbers.
Exactly.
So I think that's another question. If he takes steps back, that will hurt them, but will he take steps back?
And not having Jamal Murray is not only a strain on the Nuggets, but a strain on Jokic too, because Jokic really has to put the team on his back at that point, and that can be exhausting for any player. So
yep.
To expect an MVP season from Jokic might be a bit unreasonable, but he certainly is capable of doing it nonetheless. So
yep. Then at 5, Philadelphia, and once they figure out Ben Simmons, they should get some value back.
Right.
But even without him, I think this team is built well. Once they know going into a season, okay, we can't depend on this guy. So you ride Joel Embiid and you ride Tobias Harris, and I think that'll work.
But you keep in mind that this team will be fine without Ben Simmons, because Ben Simmons really wasn't a factor for them in the playoffs last year. But bringing up the playoffs, out of this top 5 here, they certainly are the worst, and out of the contenders, I think they're the worst contender in a sense that...
And they've been the worst contender.
They can't find a way to show up in big moments. They haven't made it past the second round in some time now. In terms of the process Sixers haven't made it past the second round. This is a team that all the expectations were there for them with an injured Nets team to really come through and push for that title, and they underperformed again. So obviously, if Ben Simmons is playing well and playing like we've seen Ben Simmons play before, he certainly helps this team. But now that Ben Simmons doesn't want to be there, and even if he miraculously comes back, he's not really going to add anything to your team if we're seeing playoff Ben Simmons. So
yep.
this is a team that I didn't think really added enough in the offseason. And I think the fact that you still have so much money allocated to Ben Simmons, your hands are tied at that point. They didn't add what I felt they had to add to really push for a championship.
No. Then you get into teams that are looking to dominate their respective conferences. Phoenix, they're built well. They don't really struggle with injuries, and they have a lot of options, a lot of depth. They didn't lose anything, and Chris Paul, Devin Booker is my personal favorite duo right now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is going to rely on DeAndre Ayton, as obviously there's some contract disputes on whether the Suns want to give him the max contract that a lot of rookies have seen this or not. A lot of people have seen coming off of their rookie contract, not rookies, sorry. Whether he can get that max deal, and it rightfully so. There is some doubt because, like we've said before in our top 10 centers video, it's a lot of a mental thing with DeAndre Ayton that you look at him and he seems to get in his own head sometimes. And that's some reason of which Ayton are you going to get? Are you going to get playoff Ayton, or are you going to get, I guess, early regular season Ayton or Ayton from years past? We've seen that he has the potential to live up to that number one seed, and he's really the X factor of when he performs well, this team made a run to the finals. And then when they got to the finals and he wasn't performing well in those 4 games, they looked a little lost. So yeah. He is the X factor because you know that Booker and Paul are going to pull up.
For sure. Utah, I think they're nasty, and you can't overlook this team. Donovan Mitchell every year has gotten better. Rudy Gobert seems to continue improvement. Mike Conley's a great supporting piece. I mean, they're just a filthy team. They're well built. The only time I can knock them is losing to Paul George in the Clippers last playoffs. But outside of that, they never disappoint. Right.
This is a team that there's not really a doubt in my mind that they won't finish in the top 3 in the Western Conference, as I feel like they are the best in terms of regular season play. They are a team that really pushes to be up high, to have that peace of mind in the playoffs.
They're just going to have to cruise to the playoffs and get it done then.
Exactly.
Then you have the top 2, the teams with the best players in the world. We'll kick it off at 2 with Milwaukee. And
it's weird to see a reigning champion that didn't really change much, and that the team ahead of them didn't really change much, to drop down to 2. But I think that has to be the case with Milwaukee. A lot based on the team that we haven't won. But I think there's still some question marks around Milwaukee right now. Is Mike Budenholzer still the guy for the job to have continued success? As there was a lot of doubts that if he really didn't win a championship, he would have been out. He won that championship, but can he do it again? Because now the pressure's on there. Because this is a team that didn't change much. They could go back-to-back. Giannis is, right now, in my opinion, the best player on the planet. But it's one of those things where it's not a lot of teams go back-to-back, and I think this team, the expectation is there because they still have their big 3. So we'll see.
Running it back, I don't think they made any mistakes. It's just the question in Budenholzer, like you said, and then how consistent are Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton going to be, because they're not your traditional, like in terms of super teams, they're not your traditional second and third options.
And losing PJ Tucker is going to hurt as well, because he was another guy that really, he was kind of the 4th option for them almost.
He was the guy shutting down Kevin Durant. He was their
Kevin Durant. He was
their Spitfire.
He was Kevin Durant's kryptonite.
Yeah.
He knew how to push his buttons, and he knew how to, and without that whole mental aspect, just fundamentally he just knew how to guard him, and there's very few guys that can guard Kevin Durant, and that's why Brooklyn Nets are one.
Being in the East, they're going to spend a lot of time playing each other and competing. Kevin Durant, who I believe is the best player in the world right now. Then you have James Harden, who is the best shooting guard in the world.
Right.
It's filthy. Kyrie's not going to be there for a lot of games, but he's just the cherry on top when he is there. This team only needs Kevin Durant and James Harden.
The big question is is Kyrie going to be there? Because there are reports coming out saying that the Nets don't know if they're willing to accommodate a part-time player, because it does mess with how you coach and how Steve Nash, who's still a young head coach, how he's going to manage this team. But I think when you have Kevin Durant and James Harden, as long as they stay healthy, Kevin Durant's proven he can do it on his own. So now that you add James Harden into the mix, I think they still warrant that number one, despite the fact that Kyrie Irving very well could not be there. So,
yep, and then you still have guys like Joe Harris. There's some semblance of depth when you consider how top-heavy they are.
And you still have Blake Griffin up front. You bring back LaMarcus Aldridge out of retirement. Paul Millsap you add as well. This is a deep team, and this is a team that is more than just their stars, despite the fact their stars are so good.
Yeah, and that's what makes them a threat. This is another season where it's Brooklyn's championship to lose.
We'll break down the standings here based on our power rankings. So in the Eastern Conference, we have Brooklyn at 1, Milwaukee 2, the Sixers 3, Miami 4, Atlanta 5, and we have Chicago at 6, rounding out the guaranteed playoff spots, with the play-in teams being Boston at 7, the Knicks at 8, Charlotte at 9, and Toronto picking up that last one at 10. And then, of course, the Wizards, Pacers, Pistons, Cavs, and Magic round out the Eastern Conference respectively.
And again, Washington and Indiana are both teams we feel can push in if there is a team that we have in that drops off, because that's always a possibility with injuries and maybe things don't click the way we're projecting.
The Raptors are still in that same category as them, that they're not really, we don't feel that they're guaranteed to make that spot like the Hornets ahead of them are.
Then maybe the Knicks drop off. So
right.
We'll see. Now in the West, we have Utah, Phoenix, Denver, LA, Dallas, and Portland as the top 6. Then play-in teams, you have the Clippers, Golden State Warriors, New Orleans Pelicans, and Memphis Grizzlies rounding it out. Then Sacramento is really the only team that can probably push in. I don't know how that would work. Maybe New Orleans disappoints again. Maybe Golden State suffers from injuries. We'll see. But the rest of the teams we have out are Oklahoma City, San Antonio, Minnesota, and Houston.
Right. As we'll see if the Kings can push. That's really the only team that, yeah, like you said, on the outside looking in. And I think the Clippers and Warriors are probably the two biggest question marks of, if these teams are perfectly healthy, they're not necessarily play-in teams, and that all depends on when Kawhi gets back, when Klay Thompson gets back, and in terms of Kawhi, it's if he comes back. So with that, that'll do it for our NBA season preview. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, give it a like down below. Subscribe so you don't miss any of our other uploads. Comment down below what you think of our takes here. What do you think we got wrong? What picks did you like? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.